The quiet street, the night was cold, and the city street almost empty. A few cars passed by quickly, their headlights cutting through the silence, but no one really stopped to notice the man sitting alone on the sidewalk. His clothes were torn, his face was tired, and his hands trembled as he clutched a small cardboard sign. The sign read only one word: hungry. People walked past him, some glanced for a second, some looked away as if he wasn't there. It was a scene the city had grown used to, and yet for him, every passing minute felt like another reminder of how invisible he had become. Then, something unexpected happened. A black car slowed down near the corner, and from it stepped a man whose face the world knew. It was Keanu Reeves. His pace was unhurried, and his eyes carried a softness that stood out even more in the rough surroundings. He didn't walk past quickly like the others. He stopped. Keanu bent slightly, looking at the man with calm respect. "Are you okay, brother?" His voice was low, gentle, without judgment. The homeless man blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. People usually avoided speaking to him. Some tossed a coin without looking. But here was someone crouching down, making eye contact, treating him as if he mattered. The man hesitated before answering. "Not really," he whispered. His throat felt dry. "It's been days since I ate properly." Keanu nodded slowly. There was no pity in his expression, only understanding. "Let's get you some food," he said simply. He stretched out his hand, not as charity, but as a quiet gesture of companionship. The man hesitated again. Trust was not easy after years of being ignored and judged. Yet there was something about this stranger, something honest in his eyes that made him believe. He reached for Keanu's hand, and for a moment it felt like the whole street had grown quiet, as if watching. They walked together toward a small diner at the corner. Inside, the warm light and smell of fresh bread welcomed them. The waiter froze for a second, surprised to see Keanu Reeves, but what struck him more was the sight of him guiding a homeless man gently, as if he were an old friend. Keanu didn't order for himself. Instead, he let the man choose. "Get what you want," he said. The man's hands shook as he held the menu, tears forming in his eyes because no one had ever asked him that in years. He ordered something simple, a sandwich and coffee, yet to him it felt like a feast. While waiting, Keanu sat across the table, not in a hurry, not distracted. He listened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Daniel," the man replied quietly. Keanu smiled. "Daniel, it's good to meet you." Those words hit Daniel harder than he expected. Good to meet you. How long had it been since anyone had said that to him? To most people, he wasn't worth meeting. As Daniel ate slowly, Keanu kept the conversation light, asking about his past, his dreams, his struggles. But he never pressed too hard, only giving space. Every now and then he nodded, showing that he was truly listening. Daniel shared pieces of his story. How he once had a small job, how illness had taken away his stability, how one tragedy led to another until he ended up on the streets. His voice carried shame, but also a quiet strength that refused to disappear. Keanu listened without judgment. Instead, he spoke softly about resilience, about how life often throws storms that test people in ways unseen. "You are still here, Daniel," he said, "and that means you haven't given up." The words struck deep. They didn't sound like empty comfort, but like truth. For a moment, Daniel felt seen, felt human again. When the meal was over, Keanu paid without hesitation. But he didn't stop there. He walked Daniel outside, where the night air was sharp. He took off his own jacket and placed it on Daniel's shoulders. "It's cold tonight," he said simply. Daniel froze, unable to speak. No one had given him anything with such kindness in years. As they stood there, a few people walking by began to notice. Some whispered, some even took out their phones, surprised at what they were seeing. But to Keanu, it wasn't about being seen. It wasn't about cameras or attention. It was about one human being helping another. Daniel finally found his voice. "Why are you doing this?" he asked softly. Keanu looked at him, his eyes calm. "Because you matter," he said, "and sometimes people just need to be reminded of that." Daniel's heart shook at those words. His throat tightened and tears rolled down his cheeks. He tried to wipe them away, but Keanu just smiled gently and patted his shoulder. That night, on a quiet street where most people never stopped, a moment of humanity unfolded. It was small in the eyes of the world, but to Daniel it was everything. He had been seen, heard, and treated with dignity. And though the world outside kept rushing, though cars passed and lights flickered, inside his heart something shifted. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt hope. Whispers of kindness the next morning, Daniel woke up on the same street corner where he usually slept, but something inside him felt different. The cold ground beneath him was no softer, the city noise was no quieter, and yet there was a faint warmth in his heart that had not been there before. The jacket around his shoulders still carried the faint weight of kindness, and the memory of Keanu's words echoed again and again in his mind. Because you matter. For years, Daniel had moved through the streets like a shadow. People brushed past him, sometimes throwing loose change, sometimes shouting at him to move away. He had begun to believe he was invisible, that his existence no longer mattered to anyone. But now the echo of one gentle gesture fought against those thoughts. As he sat on the curb that morning, sipping from a cup of water he had saved, he noticed something unusual. People walking by looked at him differently. A few of them even stopped, handing him small snacks or coins, and one woman smiled warmly as she passed. Confused, Daniel wondered if something had changed overnight, or was it just his imagination? Later that day, a young man approached him nervously. "Excuse me," he said, holding up his phone. "Are you the man who had dinner with Keanu Reeves last night?" Daniel's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" he asked. The young man showed him a short video. Someone had recorded the scene at the diner, Keanu talking to Daniel, placing his jacket on his shoulders, walking with him down the street. The video had spread online overnight, gathering millions of views. People from across the world were writing messages about kindness, humility, and how even a small act of compassion could change a life. Daniel stared at the screen, his heart racing. He had not asked for attention, had not expected the world to notice. Yet here it was, his pain and his moment of hope shared with millions. "You're kind of famous now," the young man said with a grin before walking away. Daniel sat back, stunned. Famous. The word felt strange. He had never wanted fame. All he had ever wanted was a chance, a life with dignity. Still, he could not ignore the feeling rising inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something new. But as with every story, not everyone saw it with kindness. As the day went on, Daniel overheard whispers. Some people doubted him, saying he didn't deserve the help, that he was probably pretending to be homeless. Others criticized Keanu, accusing him of doing it for attention, even though Daniel knew with all his heart that was not true. The mix of voices confused him. Hope battled with fear, and gratitude fought against shame. He pulled the jacket tighter around himself and wondered what would happen next. That evening, as the sky turned orange with sunset, a car stopped once again near his corner. The door opened, and to his shock, it was Keanu. Daniel struggled to stand. "You came back," he whispered. Keanu smiled gently. "I said we'd talk again, didn't I?" he replied. They walked together to a quiet bench under a tree, away from the crowd. Keanu spoke calmly. "Daniel, the world saw what happened last night. People are talking, and many of them want to help. But before anything else, I want to ask you, what do you want?" The question struck deep. No one had asked him that in years. What did he want? Daniel looked down at his hands. "I want a chance. I want to work again, to live like everyone else. I don't want to be invisible anymore." Keanu nodded, his expression serious but kind. "Then that's where we'll start." Daniel's eyes filled with tears again. "Why me?" he asked. "Because kindness doesn't choose," Keanu said, "and because I believe you're stronger than you think." As they sat on that bench, the night settling around them, Daniel felt a strange sense of possibility. The road ahead would not be easy, he knew that. People's opinions would shift and challenges would return. But now, for the first time, he felt he wasn't facing it alone. The next chapter of his life was beginning, and it was filled with uncertainty, with fear, but also with hope. The storm of doubt the following days felt like a blur for Daniel. Everywhere he went, people looked at him differently. Some faces lit up with recognition and kindness, offering him food, blankets, or even words of encouragement. Others, however, carried suspicion. Whispers followed him down the street, comments about whether he really deserved the attention, whether he was using Keanu's kindness for fame. Daniel tried to ignore them, but at night, when he lay on the hard ground beneath the bridge, the doubts grew louder. He held on to the jacket Keanu had given him, clutching it like a lifeline, but questions haunted him. Was he strong enough to change, or would the world tear him down again? One morning, as the city stirred awake, Daniel saw a group of men approach him. They were strangers, their faces hard, their voices mocking. "Hey, you're that guy from the video, right?" one of them sneered. "You think you're special now. Just because a celebrity felt sorry for you?" Daniel's heart raced. He stayed quiet, hoping they would leave, but they pressed closer. Another man laughed. "Bet you're making money off this, huh? Probably not even homeless." Before Daniel could reply, one of them kicked the small bag that held his few belongings. It spilled open, an old photo of his family, a worn Bible, and a broken watch. The men laughed louder. "What a joke," one said before walking away, leaving Daniel shaken and humiliated. As he gathered his things, tears burned his eyes. The cruelty cut deeper than hunger ever had. The world had seen him for one moment of hope, but now it seemed eager to pull him back into the shadows. That evening, Keanu returned. He found Daniel sitting alone, his head bowed low. "What happened?" Keanu asked gently. Daniel shook his head, his voice breaking. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I'm just a burden." Keanu sat beside him quietly. For a long time he said nothing, letting the silence breathe. Then he spoke, his voice steady. "Daniel, people will always have opinions. Some will cheer for you, some will try to break you. But what matters isn't what they say, it's what you choose to believe about yourself." Daniel looked at him, eyes wet. "But I'm scared. What if I fail again?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Everyone fails. I have failed many times, but failure is not the end. It's a step. Resilience means standing up again, even when the world pushes you down." Those words sank into Daniel's heart like rain falling into dry soil. He wanted to believe them, but the fear still lingered. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, I have a friend who runs a shelter. It's not perfect, but it's a place to rest, to rebuild. Will you trust me and come?" Daniel hesitated. Leaving the street meant leaving the only life he had known for years. But something inside whispered that this was the chance he had longed for. He nodded slowly. The next morning, they went together to the shelter. The building was simple, its walls chipped, but inside there was warmth. Men and women greeted them, some curious, some welcoming. For the first time in a long while, Daniel was given a bed, a hot shower, and a clean set of clothes. As he looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror, Daniel barely recognized himself. The dirt and weariness were still there, but behind his eyes a small spark had returned. Yet deep in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The real test was not just about having a roof or a meal. It was about whether he could find the strength to rise again when storms of doubt returned. And he knew the storm was not over. The first step back the shelter gave Daniel something he had almost forgotten: routine. He woke up to the smell of coffee, shared meals with people who had their own stories of loss, and listened to the quiet rhythm of a place where broken lives tried to rebuild themselves. But even within those walls, his heart struggled with fear. Could he really step back into society after years of being invisible? One morning, Keanu arrived at the shelter. His presence was calm, never grand, never loud. He shook hands with the workers, smiled at the residents, and finally sat with Daniel at a small wooden table. "How are you feeling?" Keanu asked. Daniel shrugged. "Better, but still lost." Keanu nodded. "That's normal. Healing is not fast. But I think you're ready for the next step." Daniel looked up nervously. "What step?" Keanu pulled out a small card and placed it on the table. "A friend of mine owns a repair shop. He's looking for someone to help with basic tasks, cleaning, organizing, small repairs. It's not much, but it's honest work. I think you should try." Daniel's breath caught. The thought of working again terrified him. What if he failed? What if people laughed at him? Yet deep inside something stirred. The chance to work, to contribute, was what he had been longing for. "Do you believe I can do it?" Daniel asked quietly. Keanu's eyes softened. "I do. But the real question is, do you believe it?" The next day, Daniel walked nervously into the repair shop. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Tools lined the walls, and the steady hum of machines echoed in the background. The owner, an older man named Frank, greeted him with a firm handshake. "Keanu told me about you," he said. "Around here we don't judge, we work. Ready to start?" Daniel nodded, though his hands trembled. The first few hours were awkward. He dropped tools, moved slowly, and his body, unaccustomed to the rhythm of labor, ached with every motion. But Frank was patient. "Don't rush," he said kindly. "Everyone learns step by step." By the end of the week, Daniel had begun to find a rhythm. Sweeping the floor, sorting parts, even handing tools during small repairs gave him a strange sense of pride. For the first time in years, he felt useful again. But the outside world was not always as kind. One afternoon, as Daniel walked back to the shelter, two men recognized him from the viral video. "Hey, that's him," one said. "The guy Keanu Reeves saved." At first, they seemed curious, even friendly, but then their tone shifted. "So what's it like being famous for being a beggar?" they mocked. "Must be nice, living off someone else's kindness." Daniel's chest tightened. The shame he thought he had left behind came rushing back. He walked faster, avoiding their eyes, but their laughter followed him like a shadow. That night, lying in his small bed at the shelter, he couldn't sleep. Doubts tore at him. Maybe they were right. Maybe he didn't deserve this chance. Maybe everything would fall apart again. The next day, Keanu visited again. He noticed the heaviness in Daniel's eyes. "What happened?" he asked gently. Daniel shook his head. "People don't see me as someone trying, they see me as someone who doesn't belong." Keanu leaned forward. "Daniel, listen to me. The world will always have doubters, but you are not defined by their words. You are defined by your actions, and every day you choose to try, you prove them wrong." Daniel swallowed hard. "But what if I fall?" Keanu smiled softly. "Then you get back up. That's resilience. That's what makes you stronger." Those words settled in Daniel's heart like quiet fire. He realized the journey would not be easy, but maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe the struggle itself was what would shape him. As he returned to work the following week, something inside him shifted. Each small task became a declaration: "I am still here. I am still fighting." But what neither he nor Keanu knew was that a bigger test was about to arrive. One that would push Daniel to the edge and reveal just how much strength he truly carried. The breaking point, the weeks passed, and Daniel slowly grew into his new routine at the repair shop. The steady hum of machines, the clinking of tools, and Frank's calm voice became anchors in a life that had once felt adrift. For the first time in years, he felt a fragile thread of stability weaving into his days. Yet life, as always, was unpredictable. One cold morning, Daniel arrived at the shop to find Frank speaking with two strangers in suits. Their expressions were stern and their voices carried the sharpness of authority. Frank looked troubled. When Daniel walked in, all three turned toward him. "Daniel," Frank said gently, "these men are from the city office. They've received complaints." Daniel froze. "Complaints?" One of the men stepped forward. "We've had several reports questioning whether you're legitimately working here or if you're exploiting publicity. Some say you're pretending to be homeless for attention." The words cut like a knife. Daniel's chest tightened, his throat dry. "That's not true," he whispered. "I never asked for any of this." The man's face remained hard. "Be that as it may, your situation raises concerns. Background checks show gaps, debts, and past troubles. We're not sure you're fit to work in an official position." Frank protested. "He's honest. He shows up every day, works hard. I vouch for him." But the men only shook their heads. "Investigation is ongoing. Until then, he cannot continue here." Daniel's world collapsed in that moment. The small thread of hope he had held on to unraveled. The shop, the work, the dignity he had begun to rebuild, suddenly gone. He left the building in silence, his steps heavy, the city around him blurred. People who once smiled at him now stared with suspicion. Whispers grew louder in his mind. "They're right, you don't belong, you never will." That night he didn't return to the shelter. Instead, he sat alone on a park bench, clutching Keanu's jacket. The cold air bit into his skin, but he barely felt it. His thoughts were darker than they had been in years. Why try if the world will always pull me back down? As the hours passed, rain began to fall. Drops soaked through his clothes, chilling him to the bone. He sat motionless, lost in despair. And then through the blur of rain, a familiar figure approached. Keanu. No cameras, no crowd, just him holding an umbrella. He sat down beside Daniel, letting the rain fall on his own shoulders. "Why are you here?" Daniel asked bitterly. "You should leave me. I'm nothing but a failure." Keanu's voice was steady. "Daniel, I came because you matter. I told you before, resilience is not about never falling. It's about standing up again, even when everything pushes you down. Right now, you are in the hardest part of the journey, but this is not the end." Daniel shook his head. "They took my chance away. The world doesn't believe in me." Keanu leaned closer, his eyes firm but kind. "Then believe in yourself until they do. Listen, life will test you, sometimes cruelly, but the test is not there to destroy you. It's there to show you how strong you can be." The words sank deep, fighting the storm inside. Daniel's tears mixed with the rain, his body trembling. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a broken whisper, he asked, "But what if I can't do it alone?" Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. I'll stand with you. But you must take the step. I can't walk it for you." Daniel closed his eyes. Inside, something fragile cracked, but behind it, a new strength flickered, faint but real. He realized he still had a choice. He could let despair define him, or he could rise even through the storm. As the rain fell harder, he took a shaky breath and nodded slowly. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try again." Keanu smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet relief. "That's all I ask." Yet neither of them knew that this trial was only the beginning. A greater challenge was approaching, one that would not only test Daniel's resilience, but also reveal how far kindness could truly go. The deepest fall, the storm of doubt, had shaken Daniel badly, but with Keanu's words echoing in his heart, he tried to gather himself. The shelter welcomed him back. the staff offering small encouragements, but the whispers outside grew louder. Online, the video that once brought kindness now became a battlefield. Some praised the gesture of compassion, while others twisted the story, spreading rumors that Daniel was faking everything. One afternoon, as Daniel walked back from the shelter to a nearby corner store, a reporter rushed toward him. Cameras flashed. Microphones appeared. "Daniel, do you have anything to say to the people who claim you're a fraud?" she asked sharply. Daniel froze, his throat tightening. I never wanted this," he stammered, but before he could explain, another voice cut in from the crowd. "He's lying, I know him," a man shouted. Daniel turned, his eyes widening. It was someone from his past, a man he had once known when he worked at a factory years ago. The man's face was twisted with bitterness. "This guy, he always took shortcuts, always caused trouble. Don't believe his act. He hasn't changed." The crowd erupted, cameras capturing every word. Daniel's chest burned with shame. Memories of his past mistakes clawed their way back. Yes, he had failed before. Yes, he had made choices he regretted. But hadn't he suffered enough? The accusations spread quickly. Within hours, news outlets carried the story. Was the homeless man a con? People who had once sent letters of encouragement now doubted him. Even some at the shelter looked at him differently. That night, Daniel sat alone in the darkened hall of the shelter, his head in his hands. "Maybe they're right," he whispered. "Maybe I don't deserve another chance." Keanu came quietly, sitting beside him without a word. For a long time he just stayed, letting silence be the comfort. Then, in a voice firm yet calm, he said, "Daniel, your past does not erase your present. Yes, you made mistakes. We all have. But mistakes are not chains unless you let them be." Daniel's voice broke. "But what if I ruin everything again?" Keanu looked at him deeply. "Then you start again every time. Resilience isn't about perfection, it's about refusing to give up." Daniel wanted to believe, but the weight of the world felt crushing. The next morning, the shelter's director called him in. "Daniel, we've received pressure from donors. Some are saying your story brings bad attention. We cannot risk losing support. You may have to leave." The words shattered him. The place that had given him shelter was now pushing him back out. He left the office in silence, his heart hollow. By evening, he found himself back on the cold streets, the jacket Keanu had given him soaked with rain once more. Everything felt like it was slipping through his fingers. And then, in the middle of the storm, something unexpected happened. As he sat on the curb, trembling, a young boy approached. The boy couldn't have been older than 12, his shoes worn, his hands holding a small sandwich wrapped in paper. He extended it toward Daniel. "I saw you on the news," the boy said softly. "People can say what they want, but I think you're trying. My mom says everyone deserves a chance." Daniel stared, speechless. Tears blurred his vision as he accepted the sandwich with shaking hands. That small act of kindness, simple and pure, reminded him of the moment Keanu had first stopped. Maybe the world would doubt him. Maybe the storms would keep coming. But as long as even one person believed, perhaps he still had a reason to keep walking. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "I can't give up. Not now." But the greatest challenge was still waiting. One final test that would push Daniel to his very limits and prove whether resilience and kindness could truly rebuild a broken life. The rise of dignity. The night was colder than usual, and Daniel sat under the same street lamp where his story with Keanu had begun. The jacket around his shoulders felt heavier now, not because of the fabric, but because of the weight of everything he had endured. Hope, betrayal, shame, and the endless battle inside his own heart. But even in the darkest corner of his despair, a spark had survived. The memory of the young boy offering him a sandwich stayed with him. It reminded him that kindness, no matter how small, had the power to lift someone who was falling. The next morning, Keanu returned. He found Daniel sitting quietly, his face pale but his eyes determined. "You haven't given up," Keanu said softly. Daniel shook his head. "I wanted to, I almost did. But then a child gave me food when I had nothing. If a boy that young can believe in me, how can I stop believing in myself?" Keanu's face lit with a gentle smile. "That is strength, Daniel. And it's time you showed the world who you really are." Together, they walked back into the city. Keanu had arranged a meeting at a community center where local reporters, shelter workers, and ordinary citizens had gathered. The air was tense, whispers filling the hall. Many still doubted him. Daniel stood at the front, his hands trembling. For a moment, fear almost silenced him. But then he remembered Keanu's words, "You are not defined by their voices. You are defined by your actions." He took a deep breath. "My name is Daniel," he began, his voice shaking but steadying with each word. I lived on the streets for years. I made mistakes in my past and I suffered for them. I thought I was invisible. I thought I was nothing. But one man stopped and reminded me that I matter. And now I stand here not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to give up. The room grew silent. His eyes filled with tears, but he continued. I don't want pity. I don't want fame. I only want the chance to work, to live with dignity, and to remind others like me that their story isn't over. If I can rise, even after falling so low, then so can they. For a moment, the silence was overwhelming. Then slowly a ripple of applause began, first from one corner, then another, until the entire hall filled with the sound of hands clapping, not out of charity, but out of respect. Tears rolled down Daniel's face. He looked at Keanu, who nodded with quiet pride. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary happened. The community center offered Daniel a role, not as a repairman, not as a worker in the shadows, but as a mentor. He began speaking to others who had fallen on hard times, sharing his story of pain, struggle, and resilience. His words carried weight, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. And slowly, the world's view of him shifted. The same people who once doubted him now saw him as a symbol of hope. Letters poured in from strangers who said his courage gave them strength to face their own battles. Daniel never forgot the nights of hunger, the voices of cruelty, the betrayals that cut deep. But he also never forgot the moments of kindness. A sandwich from a boy, a jacket from a stranger, a voice that refused to let him give up. Standing one evening outside the community center, watching the sun dip low and paint the sky with gold, Daniel whispered to himself, I am not invisible anymore. And he knew in that moment that even broken lives could be rebuilt with humility, kindness, and resilience. Keanu, standing quietly beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. You've come a long way, brother, he said. Daniel smiled faintly. No, we came a long way, because without you I'd still be sitting in the dark. Keanu shook his head gently. I only reminded you. The strength was always yours. The two stood there in silence, the city alive around them. But in their hearts there was peace. For Daniel, the journey was not about fame or pity. It was about reclaiming his dignity step by step. And for everyone who heard his story, it became a reminder that kindness, even the smallest act, could change a life forever.